city of Rome started in the year of 753 BCE. The myth of the foundation of Rome is of the twin brothers Romulus and Remus. They were abandoned as children and raised by a female wolf, then eventually a shepherd. When they became adults, Remus was killed by his brother over where the site should be, and Romulus named the city Rome. The actual growth of Rome is less exotic and interesting. The city of Rome grew out of a number of settlements that existed around 7 hills that were near the river Tiber. The settlements were near the river for the obvious reasons of a water supply. However, the area also suffered because of the nearness of the river. Each settlement was separated from the other by marshland. Each individual settlement was vulnerable to attack as a single settlement. By joining together, they were stronger. To join together, the marshland had to be drained. This was something that took years to do. The legend of Romulus and Remus gives the impression that Rome was created very quickly. The truth was very different. The real Rome began in 509 BCE, when the Romans overthrew their Etruscan conquerors. Centered north of Rome, the Etruscans had ruled over the Romans for hundreds of years. Once free, the Romans established a republic, a government in which citizens elected representatives to rule on their behalf. The republic was composed primarily of a representative body called the Senate, which was first created as a 100-member advisory group for the Etruscan kings. Later, the kings expanded the group to 300 members. When the kings were expelled from Rome and the republic was formed, the Senate became the most powerful governing body. Instead of advising the head of the state, it elected chief executives called consuls. Consuls served only 1-year terms but had almost unlimited executive power. Aristocracy dominated the early republic with a group called the patricians, who ruled over the lower class known as the plebeians. At this time, lower-class citizens, or plebeians, had virtually no say in government, and only men could vote too. Tradition dictated that patricians and plebeians should be strictly separated. Marriage between the two classes was even prohibited. Over time, the plebeians elected their own representatives, called tribunes, who gained the power to veto measures passed by the Senate. One of the innovations of the Roman Republic was the notion of equality under the law. In 449 BCE, government leaders carved some of Rome's most important laws into 12 great tablets. These 12 tables, as they came to be known, were the first Roman laws put in writing. The notion of equality under the law recurs throughout history in many different governments, including in the United States and most modern governments today. With respect to the law and citizenship, the Romans took a unique approach to the lands that they conquered. Rather than rule those people as conquered subjects, the Romans invited them to become citizens. These people then became a part of Rome. The early Roman Republic often found itself in a state of constant warfare with its surrounding neighbors. In one instance, when the Romans were fighting the Carthaginians, Rome was nearly conquered. The people of Carthage, a city in what is now Tunisia in North Africa, were a successful trading civilization whose interests began to conflict with those of the Romans. The two sides fought 3 bloody wars, known as the Punic Wars, which lasted from 264 to 146 BCE, over the control of trade in the western Mediterranean Sea. The First Punic War lasted from 264 BCE and ended in 241 BCE with the Battle of the Egadi Islands. After Rome's victory at the Egadi Islands, it stripped Carthage of its most important province, Sicily, and when civil war had broken out in Carthage, Rome seized Sardinia and Corsica as well. The Second War lasted from 218 to 201 BCE. In the Second War, Hannibal, a Carthaginian general, successfully invaded Italy by leading an army, complete with elephants, across the Alps. In August of 216 BCE, Hannibal's genius tactics were showcased in the Battle of Cannae, where he massacred 60,000 Roman troops with his own 40,000. He kept on dealing crushing blows to the Roman army after this. Unlike the Roman Senate, which had not panicked when Rome was under attack by Hannibal, Carthage called Hannibal back when the city was in danger. If this did not happen, who knows who could have won this war and became the dominant power in Europe. Hannibal was finally defeated by the Roman general Scipio at the Battle of Zama in 202 BCE in North Africa. Carthage was also forced to give up its fleet and pay a large indemnity to Rome in silver. The third and final war lasted from 149 to 146 BCE, ending with the siege of Carthage. By the Third Punic War, Rome was ready to end the Carthaginian threat for good. After a successful several-year siege of Carthage, the Romans burned the city to the ground. The Romans then poured salt into the soil so that nothing would ever grow there again. Carthage, then, was finally defeated. With the defeat of Carthage, Rome was the only dominant power in Europe and was allowed to expand its empire to its limits and allow for the occurrence of the Pax Romana later on. There were several factors that led to the fall of the Roman Republic, but the root to it all was overexpansion. Keep in mind that the Roman constitution was designed to govern a city-state, not an empire. Gains in territory led to an increase in trade, which caused the rise of the merchant class who ultimately imposed their commercial interests into politics. Large slave forces obtained through war replaced the majority of small farmers that were the core of the Republic's society, having been present in early Roman society as well as its army. As a result, farmers moved to Rome and in an effort to make a living, sold their vote. Slave revolts did take place, the last and most famous being the one led by Spartacus with a rebel army of 70,000. This rebellion will be put down by Crassus and Pompey, who will be mentioned later. A factor in the fall of the Roman Republic was the rise of popular tribunes. After wars which gave the Roman Republic massive gains in land and wealth, there was an increasing divide between the patricians and the plebeians. This gave rise to popular tribunes. It is important to note two tribunes, Tiberius Gracchus and Gaius Gracchus. Tiberius Gracchus became tribune in 133 BCE. He proposed bills that would take public land owned by the state and redistribute it among the peasantry to establish them on farms. Attempts to pass his bills only spurred further briberies and broke traditions that held the Republic together since its start, including leaving financial and foreign matters to the Senate, which Tiberius broke in his plans for land redistribution. Running for re-election as tribune, Tiberius Gracchus did away with another tradition, which led to a riot which became the death of Tiberius Gracchus and his followers. Later, Gaius Gracchus also proposed reforms. However, his proposal to grant citizenship to Italian allies was so unpopular, it resulted in a riot which killed him. Despite their good intentions, they only managed to cause political and social turmoil. The rise of private armies also contributed to the fall of the Roman Republic. Soldiers began getting paid with gold and land, a new practice which undermined the concept of fighting for the good of the Republic. This led to an increased loyalty to generals, as it was the general who would be paying the soldiers, not the Republic. Military generals began to gain popularity and recruited their own private armies, especially Gaius Marius and L. Cornelius Sulla. These generals would later conflict with each other in regards to power, and this would lead to civil war and reforms that would permanently destabilize the power of the Roman Republic by having the loyalties of the soldiers bound to the general and not the Republic. Lastly, the first triumvirate and the rise and death of Julius Caesar will ultimately bring the fall of the Roman Republic. Three elites named Gaius Julius Caesar, Marcus Licinius Crassus, and Pompeius Magnus formed the first triumvirate. With the enormous combined power, the first triumvirate intimidated the Senate and ultimately granted them political domination over Rome. Pompey was a famous military general, Crassus was extremely wealthy from proscriptions, a practice which marked a man as an enemy of the state, and upon death would have their property given to the Senate. And Julius Caesar was a popular politician among the mob. With these influences, it was thought that they could effectively rule Rome. The Senate, under the influence of the first triumvirate, gave Julius Caesar military command in Gaul, modern-day France. From 58 to 54 BCE, Julius Caesar had conquered all of Gaul and raided both Germany and Britain. The conquest of Gaul brought Julius Caesar great glory and a military reputation that rivaled Pompey. More importantly, Julius Caesar had gained the power of an extremely large and loyal army. This led to the beginnings of Pompey's jealousy and suspicion towards Julius Caesar and the intense rivalry between the two that was soon to come. Personal connections between Julius Caesar and Pompey became especially strained when Julius Caesar's daughter, Julia, died. Because Julia had been married to Pompey, there was no longer personal ties between the two elites. Furthermore, Crassus died in battle during his conquest of the Parthians. The first triumvirate was reduced to just Pompey and Julius Caesar. Civil war between Julius Caesar and Pompey soon followed, the Senate backing Pompey. However, Pompey and his forces were thoroughly defeated at the Battle of Pharsalus in Greece in 47 BCE. Pompey fled to Egypt, where he was ultimately murdered. Caesar soon found himself as the new ruler of Rome and was appointed dictator for life. Very soon, however, 60 senators conspired and killed Julius Caesar on the Ides of March, 44 BCE. This is the mark of the fall of the Roman Republic.